I'm Dr. Franklin Allaire, and I'm an associate professor of science education in the Department of Urban Education at the University of Houston downtown. I'll be your instructor for this series, focusing on preparing you for the science portion of the EC6 Core Subjects Certification Exam, Texas 391. I'm excited to join you on this part of your journey to becoming a teacher. And in this video, I want to give you some background on what you'll find in each of the 9 modules in this series, and briefly explore the 18 competencies on which both this series and the science portion of the certification exam is based. I know that you're going to hear this and see this all over the series, but please remember that if you have any science content related questions, do not hesitate to email me. Let's get started, shall we? To begin, let's take a look at what you'll find in each of the modules. As I mentioned before, there are 9 modules total in this series, with each of the modules focusing on 2 of the science teaching competencies. Each of the modules is set up following the 5E learning cycle, meaning that there is an engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate activity within each of the modules. The engage section includes a video introduction, opportunities for reflection using a KWL chart and discussion boards, and a breakdown of the 2 competencies covered in the module. The explore section has additional videos. Some of these videos will be made by me, and others are ones that I've pulled from various sources that dive deeper into some of the more challenging topics. The explain section invites you to reflect on what you've learned about each of the competencies, along with some thoughts on what you might need to study a little bit more, or how you might implement some strategies into your future classroom. The elaborate section links theory to practice through hands-on or simulation-based activities. And finally, the evaluate section has a practice quiz of at least 10 multiple choice questions written in a style similar to what you'll see on the certification exam. Now, these modules are designed for you, the teacher candidate, to go at your own pace as you explore the content in each of the competencies. You'll be supported this whole time along your journey with strategies such as the use of KWL charts, discussion boards, and guided note-taking documents in each of the modules. I also want to encourage you to take notes throughout the series. Not only should you be taking notes on the content that you find in each of the competencies, but I also want you to seek to answer these 2 questions in every module. What is it that you already understand? And what are your trouble areas? And the reason I want you to think about those questions and to try to answer them for each module, because when it comes time for you to really buckle down and study for the certification exam, you want to make sure to focus your time on those trouble areas rather than just rehashing things that you're already feeling pretty comfortable and confident about. Now, you'll remember that the EC6 Core Subject Certification exam is made up of 5 parts. Science is just one of them. Each of these parts is scored individually and requires a score of 240 or better to pass. The science exam makes up approximately 19% of the overall certification exam. There are 52 questions in the science exam, and you'll have 40 minutes to complete it. I know that I've said it before, and I'll say it again throughout this module series, but it's worth mentioning again that the exam and these modules are based on the 18 science teaching competencies. Speaking of the competencies, the science teaching competencies are divided into 4 broad areas known as domains. Domain A focuses on what I sometimes call pedagogy and professional responsibility, or PPR, for science. In most guidebooks and online test prep services, however, they'll refer to it simply as teaching science. This domain contains the first 6 competencies. Domain B contains 4 competencies focusing on the physical science. Domain C contains 4 competencies focusing on the life sciences. And Domain D contains 4 competencies focusing on the earth and space sciences. So now that we're talking a little bit about the competencies and the domains, let's take a closer look at each of the domains and the competencies within them. Starting with Domain A, teaching science, we have again 6 competencies within this domain. Competency 1 says the teacher understands how to manage learning activities, tools, materials, equipment, and technologies to ensure the safety of all students. Competency 2 says the teacher understands the history and nature of science, the process and role of scientific inquiry, and the role of inquiry in science education. Competency 3 says the teacher understands how science impacts the daily lives of students and interacts with and influences personal and societal decisions. Competency 4 says the teacher knows and understands the unifying concepts and processes that are common to all sciences. Competency 5 says the teacher has theoretical and practical knowledge about the teaching science and how students learn science. And finally, Competency 6 says the teacher knows the varied and appropriate assessments and assessment practices for monitoring science learning in laboratory, field, and classroom settings. So as you can see, there are 6 competencies within Domain A, teaching science. If you think about this, each of the modules in this series contain 2 competencies, which means that the first 3 modules of this series will focus strictly on Domain A. The first module will focus on competency 1 and 2, the second module, competencies 3 and 4, and the third module, competencies 5 and 6. From here, we get into the science content, starting with Domain B, physical science. Competency 7 says the teacher understands forces and motion and their relationships. Competency 8 says the teacher understands the physical and chemical properties of and changes in matter. Competency 9 says the teacher understands energy and the interactions between matter and energy. And finally, for Domain B, competency number 10 says the teacher understands energy transformations and the conservation of matter and energy. So as you can see, there are 4 competencies within Domain B, which means that there are 2 modules that make up that take care of physical science in this module series. Moving on to Domain C, the life sciences, we come to competency 11. The teacher understands the structure and function of living things. Competency 12 says the teacher understands reproduction and the mechanisms of heredity. Contrary to popular belief, evolution is taught in Texas schools. And competency 13 says the teacher understands adaptations of organisms and the theory of evolution. And finally, competency 14 says the teacher understands the relationships between organisms and the environment. So just like Domain B for physical science, we also have 4 competencies in the life sciences, which means that 2 of the modules in this series focus exclusively on the life science competencies. Last but certainly not least, we come to Domain D, the earth and space sciences. Competency 15 says the teacher understands the structure and function of Earth systems. Competency 16 says the teacher understands cycles in Earth systems. Competency 17 says the teacher understands the role of energy in weather and climate. And finally, for Earth and space sciences, as well as all of the science teaching competencies, competency 18 says the teacher understands the characteristics of the solar system and the universe. So just as I mentioned with Domain B and Domain C, the physical and life sciences, with 4 competencies making up the earth and space sciences, there will be 2 modules in this series that focus exclusively on the earth and space sciences. Before we say goodbye today in this introductory video, I want to go over a few reminders with you and some things to think about as you go through this module series and as you prepare for your core subject certification exam as well as all of your certification exams. And first and foremost, that is that you need to be the captain of your certification exam. Nobody else can do this for you. You're the one that has to do the hard work. And I, again, applaud you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to participate in this series and to start preparing for the core subject certification exam. You're going to need to study a little bit every day. I do not want you to wait until the last minute when it comes to studying for this exam. Remember, science makes up one of 5 parts of the core subjects exam. So you need to make sure that you are making time to study all of the things that you need to for all 5 of those subject areas, which again is why it's important to think about what are the things that you already understand and what are your trouble areas, not just in science, but in all of the content areas that you need to study for the certification exam. Practice, 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 a little bit every day. You should be trying to take every single practice test that you can find, okay? Whether it's free or you're using a diagnostic exam that you're using through the department, or if you're paying for a service like 240 tutoring, whatever it is, try to take every single practice test that you can. Time yourself and train yourself to answer those 52 questions in 40 minutes or less. And last but not least, again, a reminder that nobody else can do this for you. You really need to own your certification exams, which is why I mentioned at the beginning of the reminders that you need to be the captain of your certification exam. Well, that's enough talk about the competencies and the exam for now. Let's go ahead and get started with the modules, shall we?